Welcome everyone to Charts Free webinar series. Today we are welcome Patrick Yearout for presenting on Forgotten Fundamentals, Rediscovering Training Basics. Thank you, Patrick, for joining us today.
Thank you, Tara, and thank you for everyone who joined me this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you are, to talk about Forgotten Fundamentals. I'm very appreciative of your time, and I'm very appreciative of this webinar series. This was something that we started back when I was on the board 6 years ago, so I'm thrilled that it is still going strong today. As Tara said, my name is Patrick Yearout. I am the Director of Innovation, Recruiting, and Training for Ivers and Kid Valley Restaurants over in Seattle, Washington. I have been a chart member now for 19 years. I've been at Ivers and Kid Valley 22 years as of this month, and I've been working in the hospitality industry for 29 years as of this month. So I'd like to start the session today by going back in time, but don't worry, I'm not going to go back 19 or 22 or 29 years. I only want to go back 16 months, if you can remember that far back, 16 months back to February of 2020. And here's what February of 2020 looked like for CHART. As you can see, lots of people standing together, close together, or sitting close together. Nobody wearing any masks, obviously, no social distancing, no plexiglass screens back in February of 2020 to keep us apart. Just people having a good time and enjoying each other's company all together in the same room. I think my favorite one of these pictures that was down here on the bottom right by the chart logo, you see these two women standing together. They're actually getting food together from a buffet. So I know it's been a long time since we've probably done that. But this is what CHART looked like in February of 2020. And I did check, this conference started on February 22nd, 2020. And as of February 21st of that year, there were 35 documented cases of coronavirus in the United States. So obviously the coronavirus and COVID-19 was not a topic of conversation or even a concern when it came to everybody here in February of 2020. So if we move from this to 1 month forward to March of 2020, these type of gatherings were replaced with this. And we're certainly still doing that today. Lots of Zoom calls, I'm sure, for everyone, but it was a terrible time for our country and a terrible time for our industry, obviously, when the coronavirus started spreading across the country. Certainly in hotels with the lack of travel, suffered a great loss in business. Casinos had to be closed. We do have some chart members who work in senior living facilities, and there was a lot of new rules and especially around visitation. And then for us in the restaurant industry, of course, we had either closed locations or, if they were allowed to be open, had closed dining rooms or limited capacity dining rooms. So a lot of changes going on. And what I'd like to ask of you who are attending, if you can think back to the start of the pandemic or during the pandemic, what were some of the new topics that the pandemic forced you to train people on or train them about, or something that maybe you had to become an expert on that you previously hadn't considered? Or maybe you started working in a new department because of furloughs and layoffs and you had to help out in marketing or IT or HR, or maybe there was a new website or new program system vendor that you started using. If you could use the chat function, go up into the chat function and type in just an example or two of some of the new stuff that you started using during the pandemic. I'm going to open the chat box here and see what we got. So COVID guidelines for team members, PPE, a lot of us who hadn't heard the term PPE before. Virtual presentation skills. I saw curbside carryout. That's definitely something. Yes. Smiling with our eyes. Yes. When you're covered with a mask. How to wear a face mask correctly and what to do with the face mask once you take it off. Certainly another one. How to use disinfectant. Yes, that was something. How to use Microsoft Teams. For those of you who didn't use Zoom. Yes, another good one. Voiceover work. Oh, an interesting one. Yeah, so lots of new things that come along. I remember talking to one hotel person. She was writing a script for when guests complain about the fact that the hot buffet breakfast has been replaced with a cold bag breakfast, and what her front desk clerk should tell those guests when they find out about that. How to deal with crazy people who refuse to wear masks, how to check ID of a mass customer. That's a good one. I hadn't thought of that one. So all kinds of new stuff thrown at us when it comes to being trainers. Oh, the health code, yes, reading the health code, staying up to date on the health department, and the CDC. So lots of new things coming at us. How to help our teams deal with ambiguity, changes to dining venues, hotel and casino floor plans, tracing close contact. Yes, that's something that we still do up here in Washington State. So some very good examples of all the things that came at us. And I have to say, as I mentioned before, I've been in the restaurant industry for 29 years. And I think this last year, by far, has been the craziest in terms of all the new stuff. So my next question for you all is, if you could sum up your professional work life in the last year with one word or one phrase, how would you describe it? What word or one phrase? Pivot, that's a good one. A little bit of a Friends reference there. Chaotic, isolated, changes. Yeah, change, challenging. I think definitely chaotic is one that I would use. Hectic, probably some of you feel pressure to get things done. And so yeah, with all these new changes, a lot of feelings that come up, most of them negative. I don't see a lot of thumbs up and amazing coming up on the chat function there. So yeah, perseverance, that's another very good one. Yeah, so it's been a challenging year for us trainers. And I have to say, if there's one thing that has helped me a lot during this last year, it is falling back on some of the training fundamentals that I started using when I first learned how to become a trainer many years ago. And unfortunately, these fundamentals tend to be forgotten sometimes. Even with an organization like Chart, it's hard to talk about these things because they've been around for so long, and you've always got that hot new training topic coming up. Whether it's digital or social or Instagram or whatever, you've got those buzzwords that keep coming up, and that's the thing that everybody wants to talk about. And so, because of the age of some of these fundamentals, and they've been around for a while, they might not get the same level of conversation that the newer stuff gets. And then there's always the time pressure too. When it comes to developing training materials or training programs, there's often in our industry, it's about getting things done as fast as possible. And so sometimes you want to skip over a few steps. And so you skip over the fundamentals and get right into it. So, but I believe they're really important. And like I said, they've definitely helped keep me focused and centered, certainly a little bit more calm. And they've helped me to continue to develop the best possible training materials that I can come up with for Ivers and Kid Valley. And so I'm going to go over 4 of them today. It's going to be kind of a high level, 10,000 foot kind of a thing. I'm not going to go too deep into them, but I will present you with some resources if you want to learn more. And if you want to continue the conversation, if you really do want to have a deep dive about some of these topics, I'm going to give you my email address at the end, and I'd be happy to continue the conversation with you as long as you would like, to make sure that you have a full understanding of these fundamentals and how they can help you as well. Okay, so the first one we're going to talk about, now we're not moving here. Okay, there we go. First one we're going to talk about are training objectives. So probably just from the term training objectives, you have some idea what I'm talking about here. It's a goal-oriented thing, but training objectives are a specific term for training. So if you're not familiar with them, training objectives are focused statements that tell us what the training will accomplish. So if I were designing training objectives for this particular set of the particular section of the webinar, I would say maybe something like understanding the relevance and importance of using training objectives. That would be a training objective. Or I could say incorporating training objectives into your next instructional design task. So it's just a short statement, and it answers this question: when the learners have finished, what do you want them to be able to do? When the learners are finished, what do you want them to be able to do? This is what your training objective should answer. This is also a great question if you ever get assigned a vague training program, or you get assigned a vague training task. If operations comes to you and says, hey, we need a new customer service program, and they're a little bit vague on what they want, this is a great question to come back to them at and say, when the learners have finished taking this wonderful course that I'm going to design, what do you want them to be able to do? And And one of the great things about training objectives is that they provide clarity, not just for the trainer or not just for the trainee who's taking the class, although certainly it does help them. It also helps the trainee's manager, provide some sort of expectation when the trainee returns, this is what they're going to be able to do. And then of course it helps you as the trainer or the instructional designer to, understand at the end of this class, this is what my trainees need to be able to do. And your secret weapon when it comes to developing training objectives is a tool called Bloom's taxonomy. Now, this was something that was designed by an educational psychologist by the name of Benjamin Bloom. And yes, that's his real name, Benjamin Bloom. And it was created way back in the 1950s. And what it is, it's a hierarchy of the cognitive domain, which is just a very fancy way of saying that people learn at different levels, or people learn new things at different levels. And Benjamin Bloom came up with 6 different levels of learning. And when you see these 6 different levels, it helps you to understand where you should target your training so that you can develop the best training objectives. So I'm going to show you the whole thing here. I was originally going to show you one step at a time, but I think I'll show you the whole thing so it's a little bit easier to understand. You see the base down there, that's the more basic level things that are more common. So it's wider at the base. And then as you move up, each subsequent level becomes less common in terms of the way people learn, and it becomes a little bit more challenging. So the most basic level there of Bloom's taxonomy is to remember things. So this is just keeping stuff in your brain. If you're designing a training program and you're working with, say, cashiers because there's a new sandwich on the menu and you want them to remember the ingredients and you go through it, all they have to do is remember it. Keep it in their brain in case somebody asks it about it. That's the most basic level of learning. One step up from that is understanding, where you explain ideas or concepts. Another step up from that is the application level, where you take knowledge that you've learned and apply it to a new situation. For example, if you are training or if you're designing a training program about guest recovery and dealing with guests who are having problems with your operation, then you can give the tools to the trainee, but they need to apply them for that specific situation, whatever come up, so that they can solve the problem that the guest is having. That's the application stage. Then you have the analyze stage, where you draw connections between ideas. You take in information and look for connections between them. You have the evaluation stage, where you take in information and then evaluate it or appraise it. And then the last step, the highest step in Bloom's taxonomy, is the creation stage. This is where you take in new information and use it to create new things. Some of the words there, you see design, assemble, and then the newer words would be like a blog or a podcast. So anyway, these are the 6 different levels. And when you're deciding on your training program, you need to determine at what level. Sometimes it's multiple levels, but can be only one. Decide at what level you want your training to focus. And then you use the action words that you see there to help create your training objectives. So if you're at the remembering level, again, the example of just a new menu item and you want your people to know the ingredients, then they just need to be able to memorize them and state them. That's all you need to do, and you can create your training objectives about that. So that's what Bloom's taxonomy is. I know it seems a little complicated if you've seen it before, but it is a great tool to help get you started, get those training objectives rolling so that you can create the best training objectives possible. And again, that will help you stay on track when it comes to designing your training program. Now, if you want more information about it, there's a wonderful old book. It is called Preparing Instructional Objectives. It's by Robert Major, and it was written originally back in 1962. So it is an oldie but a goodie, but it is a wonderful book, and it's actually quite funny. You wouldn't think that it would be funny, but it is a great book. And I can, again, if you want more information about this book, just email me afterwards and I can give you that information. But this is the book that I used when I was learning about training objectives, and I still feel, even though it's more than, almost 60 years old, but it still contains some great information if you want to learn about this topic. Okay, the second fundamental I want to talk about are adult learning principles. Now, these were really pioneered by an educator named Malcolm Knowles. He was one of the premier educators in the United States during the second half of the 20th century. And he introduced people to a word that many folks had never heard before, and that word was andragogy, which is a funny sounding word that means the method and practice of teaching adult learners. And Knowles believed that adults learn different than children. The method and practice of teaching children is called pedagogy, and he was focused on andragogy. He believed that they learn different, and he believed that there were principles that you could apply to your learning that would make that more relevant to adults so that they would pay attention, connect with it, learn it, and take it back with them wherever they needed that information. So he pioneered this. There's been a lot of different variations since then. He's since added a few more things to it, and there's been other people who have taken his work and done more with it, but I stick with the original. I find it to be the most applicable for me. So he has 6 principles that he advocated for when it comes to teaching adults. The first one is adults need to know why the learning is important. As you are probably all adults, you know adults are busy people. They've got jobs, they've got families, they've got, to worry about the coronavirus, they've got all those new things being thrown at them at work over the past year. So a lot of things that they need to, that they're concerned with. And so they often go through life with blinders on because they don't want to get distracted by all the shiny things. So by telling them, by starting with, this is why this is important, it helps to take those blinders off. It helps them to go, oh, wait, I should probably listen to what this person is saying. So the key to this, however, is you don't need to tell them why it's important to the company or why it's important to the trainer. You need to tell them why it's important to them as the learner. If you're going to be talking about a suggestive selling program, don't tell them why it's important to the company to make more money. Figure out a way that why this is important to them as a trainee, because that's going to help them pay closer attention and connect with the learning. The second principle that Knowles advocated is that adults want to be involved in the learning process. The essence of becoming an adult is when you start to take responsibility for your own life and your own actions. It isn't necessarily when you become 18 or when you become 21. It's when you take responsibility for who you are. And as a responsible person, you want to be involved in the things that affect you. It's only natural. And that includes the learning process. Now, when you as the trainer are designing a training program, you can't obviously go around to every single adult and say, hey, I'm designing this and what are your thoughts? You would never get anything done, of course. But there are tips and techniques that you can use to get them involved in different parts of it. Say you're presenting a program, for example, or you're teaching somebody one-on-one in an on-the-job program. You can start the session by saying, hey, what would you like to focus on in today's training? And that immediately gets them involved, helps to get their buy-in, and you can tailor the training to their specific needs. So that's number 2, adults want to be involved in the learning process. Number 3 is that adults have life experiences that they can draw upon when learning new things. So unlike children who don't have a lot of life experiences, adults usually have a vast wealth of them. And so if you're teaching somebody how to use a cash register and they've never been a cashier at your particular organization, well, maybe they've been a cashier elsewhere at another restaurant or retail operation or a hotel. They have some sort of background there. So you can talk to them about their background and use that to connect with the training that you're giving or that you're delivering on that day. So the more that you can connect to their past life experiences, whatever they happen to be, the better that the training will connect with them. Number 4 is that adults want timely learning. If you're teaching a class and you start it by saying, okay, this is information you're going to need about a year from now, nobody is going to pay attention. Adults want timely learning. So make sure that you're doing as close as you can to just-in-time learning, and make sure you explain to them, okay, we're making this sandwich. We're going to learn how to make this sandwich because it's going on the menu tomorrow, and you're going to need to know this tomorrow. Well, they're going to be much more likely to pay attention and listen to what you're saying if the learning is timely. Adults are also problem solvers. Unlike children who tend to learn in, around a specific subject like mathematics or science or history, adults like their learning to reflect what's going on in their lives. And, if you can tie it into a problem that they're having or an issue that needs solving, then again, they're more likely to connect with that learning because adults are problem solvers. So get to know your learners, find out what's going on in their lives and see if you can tie in training to those specific issues. It will help them to connect with it stronger. And the last adult learning principle is that adults seek internal motivation. So as a person matures, the motivation to learn is increasingly internal. Now, some adults are responsive to external motivators, like getting a new job or a higher salary or a promotion. But the most potent motivator for the majority of adults is something that is internal, like they seek to do a good job, or they seek increased job satisfaction or increased self-esteem. So if you can tie some of that into your training, whether it's giving them feedback and making them feel good about what they're doing, again, it will help them connect with the learning. So 6 different principles that Knowles came up with that are great to help adults learn better. Now, you can't always have all 6 of these for every training program that you do. It depends on what the situation is. So maybe you only have 1 or 2, maybe you have 3 and 4, but the more that you can interject them into the training that you do, again, the stronger the connection will be with your adult learners. Now, if you want to learn more, the best guide to this is called The Adult Learner. It's the definitive classic in adult education and human resource development, and it was written by Malcolm Knowles. So this is the 5th edition that I have. It was written originally back in 1973, so a long time ago. A lot of highlighting in here from me. So a wonderful reference guide. Again, I can email you more information about this if you're interested in learning more. So the third fundamental that I want to talk about is called transfer of training. And transfer of training is probably exactly what you think it is. It's transferring the new skills or the behaviors that the trainee learns in the training environment back to the workplace environment, which seems like it should be really, really simple, right? But sometimes it's not. In the training environment, it's often very quiet and controlled, and everything is set up perfectly for the trainee, and it's calm, and you've got a trainer there supporting you and telling you what a great job you're doing and high-fiving you when everything's done, and yeah, it's just like that. And then you get into the real world, and then you go back to your station, and maybe you're working in the back of a full-service kitchen, and there's 25 other people there, and it's really hot, and the hoods are going off, and people are talking all around you, and you're squished into a little station, and you're trying to cut fish and do all these other things, and so you forget the new skills that you learned in your nice, calm, quiet environment because of the chaos that's going on around you. Or you slip back into old habits, if somebody is retraining you. So it doesn't always stick. And that's the point of the transfer of training, is to get it to stick, because you don't want to waste all your time and effort training somebody only to have them not take it back to the workplace environment. So there are strategies that you can use to do that. And they can be done either before the training, during the training, or after the training. And I'm going to give you a few examples here of transfer of training principles or suggestion. The first one is to allow time for pre-course assignments. Sorry, car going by. The first one is to allow time for pre-course assignments. So, if there's something for the trainee to read ahead of time, or maybe a video for them to watch, you want to make sure that they have that time so that they can be prepared when the training starts and they can have all the background material ready to go. Another one would be to allow time for repetition during the actual training. The more time that you can give them to practice, especially if it's something physical, like cutting fish. That's an example that I use a lot at Ivers. You want to make sure you give them plenty of time to repeat those actions, repeat those new skills, so that they will take them back to the workplace. A third suggestion would be to set up a buddy system. If you have 2 people from the same operation who go through training at the same time, we'll set them up as supporting buddies, so that when they go back into the operation, that they can check in with one another, make sure that they're still doing everything correctly. They can help keep one another on track using this buddy system. Providing job aids. We all love a good job aid, don't we? Whether it's an easy reference guide or something that posts up on the wall. These are great tools when trainees are going back into the place to help them remember, especially if it's a new script. If there's a lot of words that they have to learn, this can be a great tool for them to help, so they can read and practice and recite everything. And then the last suggestion that I have here is offering incentives or rewards. If you have a way of incentivizing people, or maybe you just do a contest where, if you're if you're trying to sell a new item or a new service and you're having a suggestive sales contest between different operations, it gets people excited and motivated, and it makes them want to do that new behavior back in the workplace. And if a contest isn't the way to go for your particular organization, you might consider like a charitable contribution. For every one of these items you sell or service that you provide, maybe you contribute to a local organization, and that way it gets people excited about it, still motivates people, but the real winner here is the communities in which you operate your businesses. So those are 5 suggestions that I have. If you want a lot more, I would definitely suggest this book. It's called Transfer of Training by Mary Broad and John Newstrom. It was written back in 1992, so almost 30 years ago. And it is a wonderful reference guide. And it goes through all the different steps before, during, and after training. And it provides in-depth strategies for the trainee to do, the trainer to do, and for the manager of the trainee to do. So it's a very comprehensive guide. You can usually find it on Amazon for either $6 or like $600. But it's the exact same book, so just get the $6 version. Don't get the $600 version. There is also something called Beyond Transfer of Training that's by Mary Broad. This is a much thicker book and it's very theoretical. Don't get that one. Stick with the original, Transfer of Training by Mary Broad and John Newstrom, a great reference guide. If this is what you want to learn about, if you're having trouble getting your training to stick, the information that you need is definitely in here. Okay, last one that we're going to go through here is the Addie Model. Now, the Addie Model is a framework for designing training programs. It is an effective training programs. It's the one that I happen to use. Now, there are a lot of other versions of, there's a lot of other training models out there. There's some variations of the Addie model. There's some that aren't even like the Addie model, but I prefer this one for 2 specific reasons. One, I find that it covers all the important steps that I need for designing effective training programs for Ivers and Kid Valley, and I've used it for many, many, many years. And it's also not strictly linear. You can jump in between the different sections and stuff, and so I like that part of the Addie model. That keeps it as my favorite, I guess. So again, there's other variations of it, but I'm going to go through this one. And this is what the Addie model looks like. The term Addie is an acronym for the 5 different steps involved in the Addie model. So the very first one is analyze. This is where you look at the performance gap. So if operations comes to you and says, we're having a customer service problem, our customer service scores aren't where they should be, you've got that performance gap, or maybe they tell you, our check average isn't as high as we need it to be. We need to increase that check average. This is where you do a deep dive as the trainer and find out what is causing that performance gap. Is it the learners? Is it a cultural issue? Is it an incentive issue? What exactly is going on here? You look at the different aspects of it. And the only reason you would continue using the Addie model, if it actually is a training problem. And that means that the employees lack the knowledge or the skills to do what they need to do. If that isn't the reason that you find out during the analysis, then the rest of this doesn't matter because it's not a training problem. It's some other problem like cultural or incentive or something else. So the only reason you would continue is if it's a training problem, and that's if the employees lack knowledge or skills on what to do. So let's say you find that's true. The employees just don't know how to do upselling, or the employees just don't know, how to take care of guests who are having a problem. Well, then you move into the design stage. That's where you start designing the particular program. You set up the framework, you set up the mechanisms to get the trainee from the untrained state to the trained state. This is where you might start including your training objectives and developing your training objectives. You might start incorporating your adult learning principles into it and think about what transfer of training elements you might want to put into the program as well. Once you get that framework developed, you move into the develop phase, which is where you develop the materials and tools as a part of this training program. This might be a workbook, for example, or it might be another job aid, whatever you need to complete this setup in terms of the instruments or the tools needed for the trainee. Once you get those developed, you move into the implement stage. This is where you release your training program into the world. And maybe you are also delivering it as well, not just designing it, but delivering it. And so you work with the trainees, you you do one-on-one and do your best to close that performance gap. And then the last stage you move into is evaluate. This is where you evaluate the results of the training program. Did you actually close that performance gap, or does more work need to be done? And then if you find out that it didn't, we'll go back to, you do another analysis. Do we start over again? Or maybe there was a flaw in some of your materials, or maybe it wasn't implemented well. So you can jump in the different sections and determine where you need to course correct, and then try again. And the evaluation stage, I probably could have included Kirkpatrick's 4-level of evaluation. It was just a great method for evaluating training programs. If you're unfamiliar with it, again, email me and I'll get you all the information you need about Kirkpatrick. But another wonderful training fundamental that sometimes doesn't get talked about because it's not one of the hot new training topics, but a great way to evaluate. So anyway, so this is the Addie model. The most important step of it is the analysis stage. It's really important to get this right, because again, if it turns out that it's not training that's causing this performance gap, then you don't have to do the rest of everything else. You can save yourself a lot of time. I like to use this book. This is another wonderful book called Analyzing Performance Problems, again by Robert Mager, with the addition of Peter Pipe. This book is also an oldie but a goodie. It was written back in 1984. That was the year I learned how to drive. So a very important year. But anyway, it's a great book, a great reference to help you. If you've never done this sort of performance gap analysis, it's a great way to learn the steps that you can take to do that. So now, all of these things that I showed you, these 4 different things, they obviously take a little bit more time and effort than just jumping right in. And so I wanted to provide some support strategies as well. How do you convince operations or the executives or whoever you report to that you need this extra time? The first thing I would say would be to offer education about your process. You may know all about operations because you do all the training with them and you know the ins and outs and you know exactly, how big the fish should be cut or that sort of thing, but they might know your process. So try to partner with them, get them involved in what you do so that they can see all the behind the scenes work. I know one person that I talked to at Ivers many years ago who was frustrated by how long it was taking me to design things. He said, why can't you just jump right to it? Why can't you just get to it and make it, because I need it really fast? And my question back to him is, okay, so what time do your restaurants open? And he said, 11 o'clock. And I said, okay, great. So your employees get there at 11 o'clock? He said, no, they get there at 8 o'clock because they've got prep work to do. And as soon as he said it, he recognized that that's what I was saying to him. I've got prep work to do. I can't just show up right at 11 and bam, make it happen. I've got to show up a few hours early and get things done. And so, in people into your process, show them how you do things, help them to understand why it's important. Another thing you can do is don't ever say the word spend. When you're talking about training dollars, don't say spend, say invest. Because spend implies that the money goes out and never comes back. But invest means, yes, the money goes out now, but we are going to get, hopefully, going to get more in return. So when you're talking about the training dollars that are going out from the company, make sure you always talk about how you're investing in training. Always say investing in training, never say spending. Third, I would say discuss the possible downside if your training isn't done correctly, if you don't have all the prep time that you need. What are some of the possible disadvantages? What are the possible detriments that might occur? Certainly there's an opportunity cost if you have to start over and redo everything if it fails the first time. So talk about that downside, present it in dollars and cents and make it, have it make sense to operations so that they can really understand this is what's going to happen if I don't get the right amount of time to do everything correctly. And of course, the flip side of that is to show them the potential improvements if things go right. If I do have all this time, I'll be able to close this performance gap. We'll be able to get your check average to this much, and make sure you talk about it in the metrics that they use, whether it's check average or productivity or entrees per labor hour or whatever they use. Make sure you're using those same metrics to convince them that you need this extra time. And the fifth thing I would say, and one of the most important, and I don't think enough trainers do it, is to take credit for your success. demonstrate how your team contributed to the closing of the performance gap. So if you've got say sales are down because of the pandemic, and you design this wonderful customer service training program and sales go back up again and everything's good, make sure you take credit for it, because here's the thing, I guarantee you operations, they're going to take credit for the sales going up, and marketing, those greedy people in marketing, they're definitely going to take credit for that success. So you need to do this too as a training department. If you're not meeting regularly with the executives or the CEO or the president, then prepare a report, whether it's monthly or quarterly, showing, this is what we did and this is how it affected operations and this is the metrics that we were able to change. Make sure they understand how powerful your department is, because it really is a very powerful department, or at least it can be. So make sure they understand that, take credit for your successes. That will help you as you move forward when you do need more time to set things up. So that's the end of my official presentation. So hopefully, if you have any questions, you can type them into the chat box and Tara will read them. I've also included my email address there. It's patrick@keepclam.com, and make sure it's keepclam, K-C-L-A-M, not calm. But if you have any additional questions or want to, like I said, if you want to do a deeper dive into any of these topics or anything that I've discussed today, I'd be happy to go over that with you.
Okay, thank you so much, Patrick. Okay, again, in the chat section or Q&A, you can add a question and I will read it to Patrick. The first question that we got in today says, for those of us without training background, where do you get started with training fundamentals?
I would say, I have two suggestions here. If you have a local community college or whatever, or any sort of college, really, a lot of colleges have adult continuing education programs. Where they cover training. It's either a training specialist or just the basics of adult learning. Look in if you want to really dive deep into this, look into your local colleges, because oftentimes they have great programs. Many of them are virtual now, and you can, you don't even have to travel anywhere to go to them. You can just travel to your computer. So that's a great place. And then obviously Chart is a great organization. If you're not a member of Chart, I would definitely say join, go to the website, which is chart.org, and look at the different offerings there. We have a wonderful competency series. The instructional design competency series does cover some of this information. And so I would say, look at Chart and not just the official stuff in Chart, which is awesome and great, but all the unofficial stuff, when we do get together, when we do have conferences, when you do get that chance to have these conversations with people, it can be a wonderful way to learn and grow and pick up new pieces of information that you might not have learned about before.
Okay. Look, we only have, well, there just another question just came in. Idle Courses Academy is a great way to into training and instructional design. Okay, that was just a comment. So okay. Idle Courses, IDOL. We have no other questions, but the only things that have come in are people asking for your slides and also for the books. I just want to tell anyone who's put that in the chat, we're not keeping track of that in the chat. If you can just email patrick@keepclam.com, he can send you the slides and or the book list.
I will send you all the information that you need, later today or tomorrow, whenever I have a chance. But yes, I'd be happy to continue this conversation. And I got all the books here, and yeah, and I can send you the slides. I can send you anything you want, the websites, whatever would be helpful. I just feel these are really important to me, and they've helped me so much over this last year, and I feel like they can help others as well. That's why I wanted to talk about them today.
And as you mentioned, Chart has some resources. Anyone who's interested in Chart membership can email me, tara@chart.org. But one of the areas that you can really get a lot of help on the Chart website as a Chart member is in Ask My Peers, which is an opportunity for you to email a question to all 650 Chart members, and they will give you an answer to your question if you're looking for just the basic fundamentals and ways to start, so you're not reinventing the wheel. Okay, that's all we have. Patrick, thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to do this with us today.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.